Welcome to A Sex Worker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the answer to life, the universe, and everything is sex workers. I'm your host, Parker Westwood, and today I am joined later on, not at this present moment, by Makeda Joi for a fantastic interview. They're a provider based out in Atlanta, Georgia. They were connected to me via Tank from Full Service Podcast, which we give a shout out to, but I'll shout out again because you should check it out if you haven't. Again, that's Full Service Podcast. This interview does have some voice distortion. So if Makeda sounds a smidge like a squirrel, that is why. They requested for their privacy a little voice distortion, and I learned how to do it so that security could be had by all. And it was a fun learning process. I've told you before many a time that I like to learn things, and I do, and it was fun. And now I know how to do it for future interviews. Okay, so in this interview, we discuss some Twitter drama. We set a timer, so we only talk about it a little bit, but it is important to go into because we talk about the importance of understanding nuance and having compassion, and we talk about privilege, and we kind of break down some Twitter drama that happened and try to pick apart some meaningful pieces in it. We talk about joy as a way to cultivate resilience, and then we talk about ways to cultivate joy, both in client appointments and on our own. We talk about privilege, yet again, not just in regards to this Twitter drama, but we talk about the variety of privilege that exists, that we all have it, some form of it anyway, and the shame around admitting privilege and confronting privilege and accepting that we have it. And we get to talk about whiteness and some other things. We also get to talk about toxic masculinity, which is a lot in one interview. And we have fun while we're doing it. There's a lot of laughter. I found out Makeda has great taste in music. So stick around, give her a listen, and let me know what you think. Before we get into everything, I just want to remind everyone that we do have a podcast. Of course we have a podcast. I just want to remind everyone that we have a Patreon, and 50% of the Patreon proceeds go directly to Answer Detroit, a network of sex workers to excite revolution, a sex worker justice collective based out of Detroit. And we recently voted that the podcast money is going to go directly to sex worker exclusive art events, which we had one already. It was a blast. It was a live nude drawing event. We're hoping to do other things with like clay and all sorts of other stuff. And this is something that I'm personally very passionate about, and it relates to this podcast in that I believe telling our own story in whatever way we choose to express our story and ourselves is truly revolutionary and so important. So that is a thing. So if you want to support that work and this podcast, which does help me to be able to do this more often, because we in a recession, y'all. Yeah, go to the Patreon, support the podcast. If you can't do that right now, that's totally okay. Leave a review. That's super helpful. If you leave a review, say some kind words, suggest it to a friend, just spread the love, y'all. And keep listening. I'm really glad you're here. You're really great. With all of that, I think that's all the things. Oh, it's been some months, I suppose I should say something about that. It's been some months. I have taken the time I need to move at the speed of creativity, to move at the speed of life. And it seems like I did try at times to reach out to people for interviews, and it seemed like everyone was kind of on the same page. There was a lull. I like to think about it in a creative sense where it's like there's creation, destruction, recreation, right? And it's this cycle, and recreation being like recreation. And that can also include rest. But it's this cycle, right? And so we go through this creative streak, and then there's this destructive period. And in the creative process, there's this point of recreation or rest or play, where a lot of great ideas are born. Okay, I will get off my little soapbox about creation and stuff. I'm about to walk into a very deep period of creativity. So I've been thinking about this a lot, but I just wanted to say thank you. You all have been so patient and kind and still hyping me up even when I haven't been putting out episodes. And I'm excited to be putting out episodes more regularly again. So thanks for giving me the space, and let's get back into it. Okay, now that I've covered all of those things, I'll actually get off of my creativity soapbox for the moment. Let's get into this juicy interview with Makeda Joi. Cue music. Listeners, I am here with Makeda Joi, who is a joy, and you're going to find that out shortly. So welcome, Makeda.
Hey girl, hey, thank you.
Will you take a minute to tell us your name, your pronouns, where you're located, and what kind of sex work you do or have done?
Sure. So, name is Makeda Joy. Pronouns she, her. Based in Atlanta, Georgia, home of the world's busiest airport. And I am an escort. I am a companion.
Fantastic. Cool. And I want to take a second to do a little tank shout out.
Please shout out the homie.
Yes.
Please.
Do you wanna say how we got connected?
I will. I will tell the tale of love.
Tell the tale.
So, once upon a time in a land far, far away, I was on Spotify trying to desperately find new podcasts on the industry and found Full Service and just fell in love. Then saw that Tank was in Atlanta, promptly lost my shit, and and like consumed all of these episodes. And then found out that like he had just ended the show, and I was like, "Wait, what?" Like I just got to the party, and like there's no food left. So I reached out to him on Twitter and just sent him a DM, and I was just like, "Hey, I just found out about the show. I know you just ended, but like it's been really meaningful to me. I love what you're doing, yada yada yada. Since you're not doing the show anymore, what podcast in the industry do you love and do you respect?" And, Sex Work the Size of the Galaxy was absolutely on that list. And he just was talking about how he loved you, et cetera, on and on, parts of the shit. And so I messaged him, like, I don't know, a couple of weeks later. And I was like, okay, so for real, like, what would it take for you to come back? like, what bribe do you need? And I really told him I appreciated him because in the industry, one, you don't really get to hear something from the perspective of a client.
True.
Like that really honors and respects the industry and the workers. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciated that. And then two, like the voice of like a person of color, of a Black person. And in Atlanta, like this triple threat. And I was like, yo, I don't want to take no for an answer. So anyways, we ended up just like meeting up just like as friends, like for drinks, and had a really great time. And, he was just like, why don't you just like, are you going to reach out to Parker, or like, what are you going to do? I was like, I don't know. I'm not ready. He was like, bullshit. You need to. He was not having it. I don't know if he had like too much mezcal at that point. But anyway, so I like left there, and then that's when I messaged you, and I was just like, yeah, Tank told me to like stop messing around. And so,
Ugh,
anyways, that is how love for Tank turned into new love for Parker. And so, shout out to Tank.
yeah.
And how the full service podcast, like, still, like, people still download it and listening to it. Like, he's off doing another thing, and like, it still is serving people. So,
Absolutely. Yes. Major shout out to Tank. I did an interview with Tank on Full Service Podcast a while
mm-hmm.
ago, and everyone should go check out that podcast, even though he's not making it anymore. It's there's plenty of episodes to binge. Go do it. Let's get into the other stuff now that we've praised Tank a whole bunch. So Tank, I hope you're feeling
Okay.
hope your ears are burning or your nose is itching or whatever that saying is.
Right. The precursory, like, Tank praise. And
Yes,
then, like, he has to feel it somewhere in the ether. So, thanks, Tank.
mandatory.
All
So
right, I'm all yours, girl. What we doing? What we talking about today?
yeah, I was curious. So you're newer to the industry, correct?
I am.
You are. How did you get started? What's the origin story?
So, I have long been fascinated by sex work. Um, I don't know. I think you hear that a lot about people in this industry. That there's been some like originating childhood fascination. Um, Shouts out to HBO, like Real Sex from
Mm,
like the 90s, that made like sex and like the appearance of it palatable and accessible if you wanted to turn the volume down to one or two. Um, while your parents are in the other room. So yeah, I really appreciate like I was always fascinated by dancers. I think part of that is also growing up in Georgia, and Magic City here in Atlanta has been dubbed like the like best, most influential strip club in the world at a point, and like where hip hop legends are born. Actually, there was a really good article about it in GQ several years ago about how like Magic City impacts the ecosystem of hip hop.
wow.
Outstanding. So like yeah, like dancing was always something that I admired. Um, and I was like, I couldn't quite get that. I was too much of a Southern Christian good girl at the time. Damn it, Jesus.
It happens.
Um,
It happens to the
oh
best
my
of us.
God. Oh my God. I was in like a chokehold. I just wanted to be a host so bad, but I was trying to wear petticoats, girl, and get chose. It was the worst.
Oh my God.
um,
Bless you.
oh my God. So where? Oh yeah. So I was able to like experience sex work through like movies and media. So like I learned about Geisha, Memoirs of a Geisha.
Hmm.
Obsessed, can like do the whole script. Um, have you ever heard of Harlots on Hulu?
Yes, I have.
Ooh, I love that show.
That one's good.
Um,
I really enjoy that one.
it's so good. And I will not give any spoilers, but when old girl died, I was like, no, like you're not supposed to. She
Hmm.
whatever. That one is so good. What's another? Oh, there's a documentary I saw years ago called Horror's Glory.
Hmm.
And have you seen this one?
I have not seen that one.
Okay, so it was on Netflix, and it um, followed sex workers in is either India or Bangladesh, Mexico, and Thailand. And it also showed like not only how they, saw clients and how they worked, but also like the spiritual lives that they had, and how there was this balance in these worlds that are seemingly in so many cultures like completely juxtaposed. Like in Thailand, they would just, go to the temple before they went to work, and or even like the sex workers in India, like after they saw a client, they would like um, cleanse off the bed with like fire and herbs and like dump water. Like it was these whole rituals that they all had. I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is so fascinating. So every time I just would be able to come in contact with the industry in some way, however it was tied to culture,
Hmm.
I was just always fascinated by. And then I guess in this chapter, it became like presented to me. I learned about femdom
Hmm.
and the BDSM community in femdom, and I was fascinated by fandom. I was like, a pay pig? What? I was so,
Right?
oh my God. And, shout out to Euphoria is like how I started, like, oh my God, I just found like so many different facts. So I was like, is this my thing? And like, femdom and then learning, Twitter and like sex work Twitter. And then somebody ended up on a feed of Doms who was an escort. And I was like, it's my people.
Yes.
That's yes. Oh my God. Oh, it was like, I don't know, it was like finding like the best digital summer camp in the world. And so all of that to say, like, that's my long journey. It really has been like a long tale of like appreciation and observation of sex work throughout like history, like human history. I've read the Kama Sutra, like the original translated text.
Mm.
Um, so like sex work is just something that hold in high reverence, but I didn't ever know what my place was or a possibility was for me. And so when I saw like companionship, I was like, oh, oh yeah, that's it. That's it. So here I am. I am fairly new to this extent of the industry, but yeah, I come in with like a lot of appreciation and I guess a lot of other facets in my life that make this very easy, I think, for me to swallow and participate in and really respect.
Excellent. I love that. And how
Long answer.
I know that's a great, I love long answers. I love them. Um, when about when did you become Makeda Joi? Like,
It was actually in November. So it happened to be not long before, it was a few weeks before my birthday. And
that's when I did it
I
too.
was in November.
I I
Oh, not this
I
past
had my
November, but
first client on my 30th birthday.
really,
Mm.
you better celebrate.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was so fun.
Whoa, whoa, that is really like pivotal. That's like walking through like a arc of your life. Oh
Yeah,
my God,
I feel like there's
Parker.
something about the birthdays thing because I've heard that from a few people. Like it's close to a birthday.
Interesting. Um, I guess, I mean, I didn't know. Of course, I didn't plan it around my birthday, and I know you didn't plan like I'm gonna do this on my birthday.
Yeah.
That's what I tell them. Don't give me a present, goddamn. Give me that deposit. No, I think like when I found that this was available and possible for me, and like it jived with who I am,
Yeah.
I was so excited and like consuming and creating and like ready and like talking to people and reaching out for like mentorship and like where could I get information. And before I even like launched my website, my Twitter, I might have had 7 tweets.
Right.
Somebody found my emails like, hey, I see you, da, da, and like immediately like booked and did a deposit. And I was just like, okay, shoot, something's happening in the ethers. But yeah, I think that at any other time in my life, I would not have been ready. So it just happened to line up with my birthday.
Yeah.
So something's happening in the stars if it's happening around people's like birthdays. That's such a cool story. I didn't know that about you or that you've heard that like that's a theme.
Yeah. It's interesting when you kind of can see some patterns, whether they're coincidental or not. It's like that's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Could you have done this like if your first client was on your 29th birthday? Or do you think there was something about where you were at 30?
Oh, 100%. There was something about I would have anytime before my 30th birthday, I would have been a hot mess. Um, full
Wow.
disclosure, everyone, you're welcome that I waited till I was 30. Um, yeah, I think there is a thing about like when you're ready, you're ready. And
Mhm.
there's a bit of we were talking about this in our first conversation before we're doing the interview, but there's some privilege to that where like we are in
Mhm.
a privileged position to be able to um take the time to do whatever research and groundwork
100%.
to make ourselves feel comfortable entering in to this industry. Um,
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off because you're
no,
preaching,
go
and
ahead, do
go
it.
ahead. No, no. So like that word privilege, like I don't know, it feels like it thumps a nerve in me because I feel like privilege has become a bad word.
Totally. And it's not.
And it's not. I think it's like, what do you choose to do with your privilege?
Yep.
Everybody has some level of privilege. Like I remember like on YouTube a couple of years ago, there were these videos going around about like pretty privilege.
Yep.
I was like, pretty privilege. Okay, shit, let's talk about it. So all privilege isn't just like white male privilege, although that is potent
Mm-hmm.
and old and strong.
Oh, potent is
Um,
a good word for that. Yeah.
it is a thick concentrate throughout 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 history. So like there is, like you're saying, like the age by which you came into this industry, I came in, and it's not the same because for everybody at that age. But I think that the privilege of the age is the life experience.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, talk about what your financial situation may be, or health, or whatever brings you to this again, because it's levels to this shit.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely a privilege. There's no way, even before my birthday, that, and I'm 35 now, so I was 34 and some change when I started. I could not have done this at 33. Definitely couldn't. I could not have done this in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And it had nothing to do with, other privileges, attraction, or education or whatever. It was just like my pure like mindset,
Yeah.
my approach to business, my beliefs about my own body and myself, or societal rules, or all of these things that keep somebody locked inside or unavailable to whatever.
Totally.
So I never considered age as a privilege because I hear so much ageism, not just in culture, but in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that, or is that just on my
Oh
feed?
no, that is definitely there. There's ageism specifically around women in our culture, not even just in our industry, but it's very glaring in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the privilege doesn't necessarily come with age. I think the privilege that we're talking about here is like the privilege to have the space to do whatever healing work or maturing or development or
Mm,
whatever it might be, to get
mm,
to the place where we can do this work without self-harming.
mm,
um yeah, I think that's a huge
mm.
thing, because I think you can I think there are some instances where it doesn't matter how old you are, you can feel like you have to do this work in order to survive, right? There's like survival
Right.
sex work where you're just like,
Absolutely.
I don't have the space to do the healing that I need to do this without like
Mm-hmm.
triggering myself in a certain way, or like whatever. I just
Yeah.
need the money. um,
Yeah.
and so the privilege I see is not necessarily with age here. It's more that like we've had the space, and
Mm-hmm.
the resources to be able to prepare
Mm-hmm.
and like be
Space.
mentally grounded.
Definitely space, definitely resources to be able to do that work. Oftentimes, time can allow those things. Not always, but oftentimes those resources come with time. So as you get older, more access to these things
Totally.
just through exposure. And it's interesting, in the context of, doing this work to survive. We know the concept of like survival sex workers who do this work so that they can pay the bills, so that they can eat. I was reading a thread yesterday by a woman. I can't remember her name, but she's been active lately talking about how she's been leaving the industry, and she's been doing like a lot of polls and questions. Like what questions would you have for someone who is retired? Different things. So I've been seeing a lot of interaction. And she was telling this story. She had a long thread about how she'd had, I think, 100K saved, and said she did not have enough to retire. And so that she was going to get to 500K so that she would have enough. And she was just like arbitrarily chose the number out of the sky, and then she got to 250, and like it was just this tale of like um self-sabotage. And but
Mm,
anyways, the privilege was that because of the time she'd been in it, because of how much money she saved, she was able to go to therapy
mm-hmm.
and realize like the origins of her fear response. So she was surviving not just to not live, client to client, but because she was running from some stuff in her past that she was trying to survive.
100%.
And that still is a mentality of survival. And she had to get through that. So it was just interesting reading that because it kind of added to the definition of survival sex work, which
Agreed.
means I think a lot more of providers, a lot more providers can be in that category as well. Like it's not just people talk about something. I want, ooh, I gotta catch myself before I go down a rabbit hole. People want to talk about survival sex workers, and they're like, oh, you, it's okay, or oh, she's, she or he or they got it bad because they are. Shouts out to all survivor sex workers.
Yeah,
Men respect because you just don't know what people are doing, their motivations. But survival sex work cannot just be blanket associated with shame
totally.
or impoverished or like
Pity.
there's pity. Yes,
Mhm.
not pity. Some survival sex workers, quote unquote, have been able to experience power in their lives, sometimes for the first time, because of sex work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I look back
Yeah, yeah,
feeling
yeah.
a
No, I
lot of
feel you. 'Cause
emotions.
there's a lot of
Girl,
things, and we don't necessarily want to speak for an experience that neither one of us have
correct,
experienced. So it's like
correct.
that may be true, but also like we're not the people that can speak on it necessarily.
No.
And
And I think that like when you talk about privilege and survival sex work and like they seem to be juxtaposed and like
yeah,
and they have like this ugly relationship with each other, it gets really hairy and I feel like it steps out of this like human experience into just things that most of us have no business talking about.
totally. But I do think that like the point you made earlier of privilege is something that all of us have is like an important thing that I want to come back to too, because it's privilege is not a dirty word and it's not something to be ashamed of. I think that that's a lot of specifically like white people's reaction to
Mm.
being accused of being privileged is to get defensive and be like, I've worked hard and all of
Mhm.
that. And it's
Mhm.
like, you can have privilege and also have had a hard life. Like those things are not
Yeah.
exclusive.
Right.
Um, and just acknowledging that like you've had it a little bit easier than some people because of the amount of books in your home growing up, the kind
Mhm.
of education you had, the color of your skin, like all of those things
Mhm.
is a very important thing to recognize that our world has these like systemic
Yeah.
biases.
All day.
Yeah, all day.
All all day long. I am a dark skinned Black woman born and raised in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. You know.
I know. Girl, do I? Does a bitch want amnesia? Perhaps. Like, I don't want but also, like, I,
I love you so much.
I'm gonna just, I'm gonna just talk smack all day. And this is what's gonna happen.
I love
But like, along with these things, I'm also like have degrees and for whatever like they're worth, which we talked about. I've been to school and I'm multilingual and I've been out of the country and I'm employed and blah 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 blah.
it.
And those don't impact my business as a sex worker. Those don't get me 1,000 clients off rip. So you can have pieces, but if they don't fit into this puzzle, they really don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You can pull on them as tools at times. They're strings to pull on, but they do not. A privilege is not the solution. Always the solution to a problem.
No, no, it just gives you some extra tools.
Mm-hmm.
There's a, and yeah, it gives you some extra tools. Sometimes it gives you the knowledge of how to use the tools.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
Oh, yeah.
not going to turn this into the privilege show. I just get
No,
so
but
tight about it.
I'm glad. Well, you had said you wanted to talk about it, and I'm really glad you did because I think it's something that we haven't really touched on in the show, and I do think
Mm,
it's an important thing not only for our industry because it comes up in our industry a lot.
yeah,
Sometimes just to be
yeah,
inflammatory on Twitter, which
yes.
we can get into Twitter here in a minute if you want to go there for a second.
I'll, if you're turning it into Twitter, I will drink some more water. I will stretch. I am
Yeah,
trusting
we
your
can even do
leadership.
we could do a time limit on Twitter. We can
We
have
can do
we can have
set a
5 minutes.
timer.
We can have five
Yes.
minutes or 10 minutes to just like rant about Twitter for a second, and then
Okay.
we'll talk about joy because I know you wanted to talk about
We
joy.
gotta talk about joy because that's the point, man. Joy. I mean, the clouds are temporary, but the sun is gonna be there forever. We gotta talk about joy. Oh my god. Okay, so are we setting a Twitter timer?
Yeah. I will I got a Twitter timer going. We got 5 minutes.
Okay.
Um
You can tell you've been to therapy because you know about setting the I can't tell you how many like I've had to like read somebody their rights but set a timer. So it would only be 3 minutes of
it's
going
so
off.
sweet.
So good. Oh, shouts out to all the therapists out there.
We love you. We
We
especially if you're sex work positive,
man,
you're the best.
we love you. The world appreciates you. Okay, Twitter rant. And this is I'm gonna keep it focused to current events. Did you see the email I sent you about the whole thing with the quote unquote the PhD girl?
Yes, I
Okay.
read the initial tweet and then went,
Mhm.
"Oh God," and then like walked
Yes,
away from it.
yes. So first things first, my heart goes out to her
hmm
and for everybody that was impacted by that conversation.
hmm
Step one. Step two is, hmm, I don't even know what step two
You
is.
will you preface with like what will you just give a little overview of the so that the
Sure,
listeners know what we're referring to?
sure. So there is, um, there is a companion, and I guess 2 weeks ago now, she posted a tweet about a terrible time she'd had with a client. You know, she bought an expensive dress. She um, paid for a really nice hotel room, and she went beyond her boundaries sexually because she thought that by doing all of these things that she was creating an experience and was going to gain him as a long-term client. Now, I hope that I said that more eloquently than the tweet came across.
hmm
What has she right?
hmm
But that is what she was saying. But oh, and she also referenced her degree. She said, "I paid this much for the dress, this much for the hotel room. I have a PhD," and basically violated my own sexual boundaries. I lost so much money. I will never do that again. And immediately people are like, well, if if you've got a PhD, then go do that. Go make more money there. You're dumb. Da, 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 da. People started making memes about the girl. It blew up and it was tragic. It
hmm
was so tragic. She ended up writing some tweets saying like she needed to get off her, Twitter for a while, her mental health, she'd been triggered, brought up some old stuff for her. So
Yeah.
then there were side conversations of other workers saying like, we hope she's okay. And then I mean it was just like this firestorm because everybody's like nerves got triggered about privilege and degrees and expectations and like luxury marketing, like all of these tropes that we talk about in the industry literally were in one tweet.
Oh,
In one tweet. And like it just like everybody went crazy. And then so I think maybe a week later, like she was just trying to, continue her marketing and, her scheduled tweets, shout out to Buffer. whatever. And she made mention of like, I'm not a quote unquote survival sex worker, and you're not a quote unquote client. Like, we chose each other. What I think she was trying to say was, don't look at me like a stereotype. Like, just
Right.
look at me like this woman, you're you, we're choosing each other, we really want to be here. Which again came across as, so now you're talking about you got a PhD, and next you're talking about you're not a survival. Again, it just, I was
Mm.
like, God is bless this woman and everybody, because again, you can have a degree, you can have several. Plenty of workers in this industry do.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't get you. It doesn't matter. Like, it can be a part of your marketing, but it's not. I remember when I was starting grad school and getting my MBA.
Mm-hmm.
First month or two, I remember going to career services and saying, okay, realistically, how much can I expect to make out of school? I'm getting this MBA. My university is prestigious. Like, what can I expect? So throughout this number, like very smug, like, oh, of course. I'm like, girl, I think like 2 or 3 months later, the economy crashed.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Like, what? What do you mean? This was 2008. And so like me getting this advanced degree, literally the smug promise of it was gone in a matter of months.
Yep.
Doesn't mean shit. So I I feel sorry
Mm-hmm.
for the experience around her with this tweet, one. And then two, anybody, sex worker or not, who is struggling with what they expected from what people told them their privileges could get them.
Yep.
You were told that, she's also like, I think of like Creole heritage, which is like, for whoever's listening, it's like Beyonce.
Yeah.
Her mama, she says, my daddy Alabama, mama Louisiana. You mix that Negro with that Creole, get a Texas Bama. That's what she said.
Mm-hmm.
I have to quote Beyonce because Beyonce is
Please.
God.
Yes, always.
Oh my God. That could be, no, really, like when we talk about joy, like we can just, like, I'll just say Beyonce and we can get off the interview
Yeah, we
like
can
that.
just
Oh, dear God. Um, but this woman is, she's of Creole heritage. So I've seen people on Twitter like, she's saying she's a Black woman. And she is not. She is white with a complex. No, people of African descent
mm-hmm.
at a time in American history could also pass as white. They would call it passing, quote unquote,
Yeah.
and live as white people so they can attain this privilege and not be discriminated against.
And that
So
I
this
think
woman is,
got the term passing that like
yes,
translates today. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
absolutely. So for anybody who's listening and thought that this woman was like white trying to say she's Black, no, she is a woman of African descent. So there is a privilege that's supposed to come with fair skin. There's a privilege that's supposed to come with
A
when
degree.
you're white, a
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
So when you have you're told privileges.
We have 60 seconds, by the way, on our Twitter.
Oh, this is good. Okay, no, but then you can do your 3 minutes about Twitter because I've been running like, yeah.
This is
The
good. This is
point
juicy.
there.
I'm here for it.
Oh, juicy as fuck.
Juicy as fuck.
Juicy as fuck. The whole point is, God bless her and everybody like her who
Mm.
was told that their privilege was going to make the world easy for them.
Uh-huh.
And God bless everyone who was told if they acquired those privileges, that it would make life, even though they didn't have them. If only I was lighter. If only I went to school. If only now I can post pictures of a Chanel bag on Twitter, because then they'll buy me a Chanel bag and now I'll be a fancy lady. To have those things does not give you a promise. And
Yep.
I think that is what broke Twitter. Scene. In the
Scene.
scene.
Okay. So many things.
The things. Give me the
Whew.
things. Breathe, girl.
I know. I'm like, where do I want to begin? Because yes, like the promise of like what our privilege is or like achievements or whatever can give us, and then that not happening. That's what, like, that's the whole,
Mm-hmm.
that's why incel guys' minds are broken. Like, why
Oh,
they just like cannot connect the fact that like that we don't even have to go into incels, but like that was the first thing I thought of, where I was just like, oh, you have these expectations and these promises were given to you about your maleness and your whiteness, that you're
mm-hmm.
not seeing the fruits of that, and so
Mm-hmm.
you're taking it out on women. um
Mm-hmm.
but as far as a degree goes, okay, so the first thing I thought of when I was hearing you talk about the tweet and like the backlash is that like sex workers cannot win, um
Mm.
in general. So like this poor companion, bless her, she's so, I'm just like, my heart goes out to her because
Yeah.
being bullied online is no fucking joke. um
No. Mm.
so she said she has a degree, and she gets like backlash. She's there, people are like, well, why don't you go fucking use your degree, get a job, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if she didn't, people would be like, go get a degree, go get a
Mm-hmm.
quote
Yeah.
unquote real job. So like,
You're right.
no matter what, sex workers cannot win in that
Mm.
department because people always got shit to say. um
Girl.
and then second of all, I really love that this goes to prove, like, basically that initial tweet was her saying, like, I have a degree and yet I still
Mm-hmm.
bent my boundaries too far.
Yeah.
Like, we as women, as queer folks, as people of color, people who are of marginalized communities,
Mm-hmm.
we have learned to bend our boundaries in order to stay safe. Um,
Mm.
it's like the fawning trauma response, right? And so I think that like the saying like I have a PhD, like I am a smart cookie, and yet
Mm-hmm.
I still struggle with these things.
Mm.
Like, that's powerful and heartbreaking.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it was a very vulnerable moment. Like,
Yeah.
you don't get on, I don't see how you could get on a public forum and say, like, with, I don't know. I mean, of course, you don't know. You wouldn't say that to cause harm. You're not that
Right.
you're being vulnerable, and you think in a community of people where that will understand.
Yes.
So yeah, it was, I think it was a very vulnerable moment of, look at all the privileges I tried to assume in this place, and I was still harmed.
Yeah. And also when you're, I don't know about you, but for me, for sure, when I am in a like heightened state of arousal, like
Mm,
I'm triggered, I'm like not feeling safe, um,
mm,
which can last for like after an incident for a while. I'm not
yeah.
choosing my words wisely. Like,
No.
no,
Uh-uh,
which is like,
uh-uh.
probably don't go on Twitter, but like that's what she chose to do, and that's okay. But
Right, right.
yeah, like I feel for her in a big way. Um,
I just, if you're listening to this, I also don't want her to be called quote unquote PhD girl for the rest of her career.
yeah,
Like, I don't want that to be minimalized to that moment. So, fellow sex worker, if you're listening to this, sending compassion and kindness and grace and healing
yeah,
from me, Makeda, to you.
yeah. Also, you could own it, make t-shirts. People will buy that shit. PhD girl. I'd wear that. I don't have a PhD, but I want an honorary one day. That's my goal.
Okay, I do want an honorary PhD. It's hilarious shit. We might be the same person. And have you ever heard of somebody called Kevin Samuels?
No.
Girl, Kevin Samuels is a goddamn mess, or might I say was, because he lives or did live in Atlanta. He unfortunately was found dead this week in Atlanta.
Oh,
But Kevin Samuels was a YouTube personality, had like several million subscribers. Look at me pubbing him, and like everybody's gonna listen to this and go run to him. But anyways, he was very problematic in the or very divisive in the African American community, because he talked about relationships between Black men and women need to lower their standards. Men need to make women step to the plate and earn them. it was like, the fuck is this misogyny fest with a pocket square? Like, what
Yeah.
is this? So he had a guest on at one point, and he would ask like women sometimes, well, what do you bring to the table or something? And this woman was listing off her traits. She was like, and I also have a PhD. And he turned that into like a running joke for the rest of the his show, like the episodes where he would just like press a button sometimes of her voice. I have a PhD. I have a PhD. Like, to run this joke of like, you have an accomplishment and men don't care. Like, it was a trope and a bit of minimalization.
Ugh.
And like the last video he did apparently was a few weeks ago, and he said that Black women over 35 and unmarried are leftovers.
Oh, fuck
And
off.
oh yeah, he's that kind of guy. And then so apparently, like, they found him dead this week in his apartment.
Oof.
Their word on the street is that he was found with a companion,
Oh.
which would be a very juicy turn of events. It would be juicy as fuck. So we're waiting for that to be out. But like, just to talk about how you said like women can't win, sex workers can't win, like, it is an accomplishment. And in our world, in the vanilla world, like, it's made like a joke.
Yeah.
It's like it's so hard to attain, and then like it is easy to. I don't know. It's making my head hurt. I just
I
want
know.
to give this girl a hug.
I feel you. And it's frustrating because like men specifically trying to minimize women's accomplishments I mean, it's misogynistic and it's everywhere and it's infuriating, especially for sex workers, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I won't talk about it anymore. I don't
Yeah,
want to
on
be
this
upset. I want to
note,
be angry. I don't want to be
yeah,
angry.
we can get angry about other things, but let's talk about joy.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just gonna shift. We're gonna take a complete 180.
Yeah.
Hello, listener. So it turns out that Makeda Joi and I spoke for a very long time, and you're not going to get the whole interview today. I will be posting part 2 of the Makeda Joi interview in 2 weeks' time, and in the meantime, you just get to marinate in all of the thoughts that we just laid out in the last 45 minutes. Yep. I was going to post just an extremely long interview, but I decided against it, and I'm going to make part 1 and part 2. 'Cause why not? It's my podcast. I'll do what I want. So check back in 2 weeks to hear Makeda Joi speak on joy. You won't want to miss it. You can hear at the end of that part of the interview how excited she is to talk about joy, and that excitement just grows and is contagious throughout this next half of the interview. I just want to say thank you for being here. This podcast is a joy to create. Yeah, so I guess I'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Thank you all for being here. Don't forget to leave a review or send out some good energy or subscribe to the Patreon. Yeah. So we'll see y'all again in 2 weeks for the other half, the joyful half, the even more joyful half of the Makeda Joi interview. And in the meantime, I hope you all find some joy in the next couple of weeks to revel in, and I hope that your self-talk is full of compassion. Ooh, and now we got to do a space fact. Hold on. I've started to go with actual space facts, like real ones, not ones that I just make up, because I just like learning about this stuff. Okay, so this space fact has to do with the spatial phenomenon of the nebula, or nebulae in the plural. And nebulae are clouds of gas and dust and fragments, sometimes left over from an exploding supernova of like a white dwarf or a giant star. So that's pretty cool. It's just this like shrapnel cloud of leftover stuff in space, and they're known as star nurseries, like quote unquote star nurseries, because stars are born there, and the way stars are born there is that some of the space dust and gas and chunks and things begin to collect, like gather together. And as they bump into each other and kind of stay close and gather together, their gravitational pull increases. And so they start to pull in more gas and dust and things, more matter, and they grow. And so that something acts as a nucleus, the initial gathering together. And I'm using this phrase on purpose, and you'll see why in a second. And then it starts to create a small mass that grows larger and larger. And once enough stuff is gathered, usually I'm imagining that the gas is like flammable or like it exists in a state of emitting light, and then we have a star. I'm not a scientist, obviously. I would be explaining this much better. But there's that. And I really think that's so cool. God, I sound so. I think it's so interesting because that's how the way the matter works in the star is how people work. Hear me out on this. I'll use Answer as an example. We were all just out there, each of us, individual sex workers, floating around, and some of us bumped into each other and were like, hey, I vibe with you, and we have a similar idea of like a world where sex workers' rights are validated and exist. And we gathered together, and we had a gravitational pull, and we ended up gathering together more people, more like-minded folks. And as we gathered together, our light shone brighter, and our gravitational attraction grew stronger, and Answer continues to grow. And so it's interesting to me that people act like matter in that way, and we gravitate towards each other. I just think that's beautiful. I also really love the idea of just like we are all floating around in a nebula just looking for each other. We really just want intimacy and to feel seen and heard, and that is a beautiful thing. So keep shining bright, and you'll find others to shine with you. Community is a bright shining star. Sometimes I hate me. Nanu nanu motherfuckers.